Who are some people who telling us the truth? Ignaz Semmelweis, the first doctor to implement hand washing in hospitals. It's saved millions of lives and is the single greatest innovation in medicine. For his radical theory that doctors were patients by not washing their hands, he was shunned from the medical profession by his peers. The rejection and failure to adopt hand washing drove him mad. His rival took his job and had him sent to the asylum. He died 4 days after being committed from injuries he sustained from being beaten in the ward. Years after his theories about hand washing were proven correct. Today he's known as the savior of mothers because he first proved hand washing saved lives by implementing it in the birthing ward, where 1 in 4 women died at the hospital during birth. This was because doctors would handle cadavers and then immediately attend to birthing mothers, infecting them. After hand washing was implemented, the rate of for birthing mothers dropped to less than 5%. There was a shunned Japanese politician who had spent a lot of his town's budget on building a tsunami wall that was built higher than any tsunami ever recorded in the area. Almost all people in that town cursed him for wasting their money until his Then came the big 2011 triple disaster in Japan. No one from the town died thanks to the barrier which withheld the biggest tsunami to ever hit. Vladimir Komarov, one of the first Russian cosmonauts. He knew the Soyuz space capsule was unsafe, he told them repeatedly, but flew anyway to spare the life of his replacement pilot. Before liftoff he demanded that when he all officials at the Kremlin would have to attend his funeral and see what they did to him. All they were able to retrieve was a charred heel bone. Top image are the Kremlin officials at his open casket funeral. John O'Neill headed the investigation of the attack on the USS Cole, warned FBI about Al-Qaeda and Bin Laden, was basically told to shut up, left the FBI to head security at the World Trade Center because he knew there would be another attack there eventually after the first car bombing in the parking ramp. He 911. Sergei Magnitsky, whistleblower of corruption in the Russian government including human rights violations and strong opponent of Vladimir Putin. While in prison he died 1 week before his court date to testify from what was originally deemed malnourishment and an untreated heart condition with medical neglect. An investigation later found that he had been severely assaulted shortly before his Tesla. He single in a hotel in New York City. He said all this life he had been working to improve society and people, but was always laughed at. I guess with him now famous, he is laughing last. The Idaho cult mom, Lori Vallow's husband, Charles, not only did he know she was going to kill him but he also knew the kids were in danger and begged the police to address the fact that she was clearly not mentally stable. He finally got the police to require a mental health exam for her, but there's audio of the police officers telling her how to pass it and treating her like a victim of her husband. The audio of him talking to the police is really depressing. Guy is just begging them for help and they basically patted him on the head. He was right and now he's and so are those poor kids. Really depressing case. Father Minkler. He was a whistleblower priest in the Diocese of Albany who exposed a horrific pedophile priest and the bishop of the diocese for child abuse and also covering 4 other clerics doing the same thing. He wrote a letter to the Vatican on the matter and it got back to the bishop, who was enraged and denied the allegations vehemently. For 4 years the bishop didn't know who wrote the letter until a TV station reported it was Father Minkler. The next day Father Minkler was called to the chancery and forced to sign a letter drafted by the bishop's legal counsel denying writing the letter or that the bishop and this priest were guilty of child. 2 days later he was conveniently found in his home by his sister. At first it was ruled a heart attack and then changed to a The diocese produced his signed statement recanting the letter he wrote and the bishop claimed exoneration. There was a bottle of pills found near the priest's body later determined to be muscles relaxers. The church claimed the priest intentionally overdosed on these pills and they also claimed he left a note. However, no drugs were found in his system and no side note has ever been produced. I believe Father Minkler was doing the right thing. He was posthumously vindicated after the bishop was deposed in 2019 and finally admitted to having committed and covering 4 others. There are currently 7 lawsuits pending against the diocese due to his. Sophie Scholl was a German student and anti-Nazi political activist. She was born on the 9th of May, 1921, in Furstenberg, Germany. In 1942, Sophie and her brother Hans co-founded the White Rose, a non-violent resistance group that opposed the Nazi regime. The group distributed leaflets calling for passive resistance to the Nazi government and urging Germans to rise up against the regime. On the 18th of February, 1943, Sophie and Hans were arrested by the Gestapo while distributing leaflets at the University of Munich. They were interrogated and sentenced to death by the People's Court on the 22nd of February, 1943. On the same day, Sophie, Hans, and their friend Christoph Probst were executed by guillotine. Sophie's final words were "Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go, but what does my death matter, if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action." Her courage and commitments to justice have since inspired countless people around the world. Florence Nightingale, founder of modern nursing, did the same during the Crimean War, so it didn't fall on deaf ears. For example, although Nightingale did not fully subscribe to the idea that many diseases are caused by specific microorganisms known as germs until she was in her 60s, in the 1880s, she was well aware of the importance of hand washing. In her book Notes on Nursing, 1860, she wrote that every nurse ought to be careful to wash her hands very frequently during the day. If her face, too, so much the better. During the Crimean War, 1853-1856, Nightingale had implemented hand washing and other hygiene practices in British Army hospitals. This was relatively new advice, first publicized by Hungarian Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis in the 1840s, who had observed the dramatic difference it made to death rates on maternity wards. Rosalind Franklin was the first person to document and observe the double helix structure of DNA, but she got spied on by a competing team of Cambridge professors. The DNA images she was able to take were leaked by her superior. While her paper got published in scientific magazine Nature, the cover story, and after her death even the Nobel Prize, was given to James Watson and colleagues. Rosalind Franklin always reported her results truthfully, but even wanted to wait with the publication of her findings for her to retrieve more images to be able to tell for certain. Watson later confessed in his book The Double Helix how he provoked Franklin and retrieved the sensitive information. German podcast d1ed Verbrechen had a really good episode on it. ~N-Betrogene Fro, released the 4th of April, but there are certainly other podcasts too.